She didn't flinch when the champagne hit her face, but everyone else gasped. That was the moment Naomi Carter knew her marriage was already dead. The crystal glass shattered at her feet. Cold bubbles dripping down her sweater, mixing with the heat of her humiliation. 200 guests stood frozen inside the glittering ballroom gold lights, reflecting off silk dresses and tailored suits. Christmas music played softly in the background, cruel and misplaced. Naomi's hands trembled as she held the pen, her breath shallow, her ears ringing, not from the laughter, but from the silence that followed it. At the center of the room stood her husband, Ethan Blackwood, his arm wrapped comfortably around another woman. Claire Monroe, tall, polished, smiling like this was a celebration instead of a public execution. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't apologize. He watched Naomi the way people watch something already discarded. "You came from nothing," his mother, Margaret Blackwood, said sharply, her voice cutting through the room. "And you'll leave with nothing." Sign. Naomi had been married for 4 years. 4 years of working multiple jobs. 4 years of being treated like help instead of family. 4 years of swallowing insults disguised as manners. Tonight, they decided to end it all in front of everyone who mattered. Phones were raised. Someone laughed. Someone whispered. Naomi felt small but not weak. She signed, not because she believed their words, not because she thought she was nothing, but because they had no idea who she really was becoming. As security escorted her out into the falling snow, barefoot dignity intact, Naomi Carter lifted her chin. They thought this was the end of her story. It was only the opening scene. Before Ethan Blackwood ever broke her in public life, had been breaking Naomi Carter quietly for years. She grew up in a state-run facility where the lights never fully turned off, and the nights smelled like bleach and old blankets. 17 children to a room. Metal cots that creaked every time someone rolled over. Birthdays were just dates on a clipboard. Christmas meant donated sweaters that never quite fit, and toys already missing pieces. Naomi learned early not to ask for more, because more was never coming. She never knew her parents' faces. Never heard a bedtime story meant just for her. Love to Naomi wasn't something you expected. It was something you imagined other people had. So when Ethan really noticed her behind the coffee counter, with tired eyes and polite smiles, it felt unreal. He asked her name like it mattered. He stayed longer than necessary. He told her she was different, that her past didn't define her, that she was safe with him. She believed him, and for a while she tried to earn that safety. She worked 3 jobs while he chased ambition. She learned how to stay quiet at dinner tables where she wasn't welcome. She folded herself smaller each time his family reminded her, without saying it directly, that she didn't belong. When his sister laughed about people knowing their place, Naomi pretended not to hear. When his father called her a charity case, she swallowed it whole. Because survival had taught her one thing, will endure now, hope later. She told herself love meant staying. Staying when it hurt. Staying when it was unfair. Staying when dignity cost too much. But standing in that ballroom champagne drying on her skin, Naomi finally understood something painful and freeing. She hadn't been chosen. She had been tolerated. And the orphan girl they mocked, the one they thought had nothing, was the same girl who had survived everything without ever being protected. They thought her past made her weak. They were wrong. It made her unbreakable. Naomi didn't remember walking out of the Blackwood mansion. She only remembered the cold. Snow pressed against her coat, as if the night itself was trying to wake her up. 3 miles later, she sat alone in a flickering 24-hour diner, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug she hadn't touched. Her sweater was still damp, sticky with dried champagne. Her phone buzzed weakly on the table, 2% battery. $200 in her account. No home. No husband. No plan. She was crying so hard her chest hurt when the phone rang. Restricted number. She almost let it die. Almost. But something instinct, fate, desperation made her answer. Miss Wellington, a woman's voice said. Calm, professional, urgent. You have the wrong number, Naomi whispered. My name is Naomi Carter. There was a pause. Then, your birth name is Naomi Grace Wellington, and I'm calling about your father. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. Naomi laughed once, sharp and broken, and hung up. A scam. It had to be. People preyed on girls like her, girls with nothing left. The phone rang again and again. Please, the voice said, when Naomi finally answered, tears streaking her face. My name is Patricia Lynn. I'm an attorney. I'm sitting outside the diner right now with a private investigator. We've been looking for you for 24 years. Naomi's breath caught. Through the fogged-up window, she saw a black sedan in the parking lot. 2 figures stepped out, confident. Real. Walking toward her like this was normal. Like her world hadn't just collapsed hours earlier. They slid a folder across the table. Photos. DNA results. Legal documents. A woman who looked exactly like Naomi holding a newborn baby with the same eyes. Your mother, Patricia said softly. She died the night you were born. Naomi couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. And your father, the investigator added, leaning in, is Jonathan Wellington, owner of Wellington Global Industries, a $6.2 billion empire. Naomi stared at the pages, shaking. A few hours ago, she had been thrown out like trash. Now they were telling her she had been stolen from a life that was always meant to be hers. And somewhere, a dying man was still waiting for his daughter to come home. Naomi met her father just before dawn. The estate was quiet, in a way money can buy wide halls, soft lights, air that smelled like polished wood and old memories. She felt out of place, still wearing borrowed clothes, still carrying the weight of a life that had never known softness. Then she saw him. Jonathan Wellington sat in a wheelchair near the window oxygen tube, resting beneath tired eyes that looked exactly like hers. When he lifted his head and saw Naomi, his breath caught. Naomi, he whispered, as if saying her name too loudly might make her disappear. She took one step, then another, and suddenly she was kneeling in front of him, her hands wrapped in his, both of them shaking. He cried without trying to hide it, deep broken sobs that carried 24 years of loss. You look just like your mother, he said. I searched for you every day, every single day. Naomi listened as he told her everything. About her mother, brilliant and kind. About the night she was born. About waking up to an empty hospital crib. About never forgiving himself for failing to protect her. Each word landed heavy, painful, and healing. I won't fail you again, Jonathan said, pressing her hands to his chest. Everything I have is yours. For the first time in her life, Naomi felt something settle inside her, home. But peace didn't last. Later that morning, Patricia Lynn closed the door and lowered her voice. There's something you need to know, she said. Jonathan's brother Raymond Wellington has been running the company. He believes there's no heir, and he's been stealing from it for years. Naomi looked at her father, already pale, already weak. If Raymond finds out about you now, Patricia continued, you could be in danger. We need evidence. Time. You need to stay hidden. Naomi swallowed hard. She had just found her family, and now she had to disappear again. She nodded. I'll do it. I'll learn. I'll wait. Then she paused, her jaw tightening. But I won't stay silent forever. Jonathan smiled faintly. That fire, he said. That's your mother. As Naomi left the room, she glanced back at the man who had given her life twice, once at birth, and once by telling her the truth. Hours earlier, she had been a discarded wife with nowhere to go. Now she was the rightful heir to an empire, and a storm quietly gathering strength. They thought she had been erased. They had no idea she was just beginning to emerge. Naomi didn't rush her revenge. She prepared for it. The next 2 months passed like a quiet transformation. No headlines, no drama, just discipline. While the world believed Naomi Carter had vanished, she was being rebuilt behind closed doors. Private tutors filled her days, their voices steady as they taught her the language of power, balance sheets, corporate law, hostile takeovers, leverage. At night she studied alone, replaying every insult, every smile that had cut too deep, not with anger, but with focus. Pain had sharpened her. Patricia Lynn brought her files. Investigators brought her truth, and the truth was devastating. Ethan Blackwood's company was collapsing under the weight of lies. $2 million in hidden debt. Loans stacked on loans. Deals propped up by confidence instead of cash. His marriage to Claire Monroe wasn't love, it was strategy. Her father's law firm was the only thing keeping Ethan afloat. Margaret Blackwood's hands weren't clean either. Gambling debts. Offshore accounts drained dry. $800,000 gone, swallowed by desperation she hid behind pearls and arrogance. Their empire wasn't strong, it was rotting. Then came the detail that stopped Naomi's breath. Ethan had stolen her money. The $8,000 she'd saved over years, tips, overtime, exhaustion, gone. Gambled away. Worse, he had forged her signature on loan documents. $45,000 in debt tied to her name. He hadn't just humiliated her. He had planned to bury her. Naomi didn't cry. She nodded once and asked for more files. That was the moment Malene Grant was born, a European investor. Quiet. Untouchable. Her hair styled differently. Her posture changed. Designer clothes replaced survival layers. Glasses framed her eyes like armor. When she walked now, rooms leaned toward her. And no one recognized her. Using shell companies and legal precision, Malene Grant approached the Blackwoods with a $10 million investment proposal. Gregory Blackwood nearly trembled when he shook her hand. Ethan stared too long, confusion flickering behind his eyes. But he never saw Naomi. Not the girl he discarded, not the woman he underestimated. At night alone, Naomi sometimes caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. But she didn't mourn who she had been. She honored her, because that girl survived everything without protection. And this woman had power. Naomi wasn't driven by cruelty. She wasn't chasing revenge for satisfaction. She was restoring balance. They had written her off as nothing. So she would show them quietly, precisely, legally, what happens when nothing learns the rules of everything. The conference room was full before Naomi even stepped inside. Cameras lined the walls. Investors whispered. Executives adjusted their cuffs, smiling with the confidence of people who believed the future belonged to them. At the front row sat Ethan Blackwood, hands folded, posture proud. Beside him, his parents glowed with expectation. They thought this day would save them. They thought wrong. Naomi entered as Malene Grant, calm and deliberate heels echoing softly against marble. She wore a deep burgundy dress, elegant, controlled, unmistakably powerful. The room leaned toward her without realizing why. This was the woman with the money. The solution. The answer. She stood at the podium and waited. Silence settled. "My name is not Malene Grant," she said. The room stiffened. She removed her glasses slowly, lifted her chin. Let them really look at her. "My name is Naomi Grace Wellington." Ethan's face drained of color. "I am the daughter of Jonathan Wellington." She continued, her voice steady, and the sole heir to Wellington Global Industries. The room exploded. Shouts, flashing cameras, chairs scraping back. Ethan stumbled to his feet, shaking his head like denial might rewrite reality. Naomi didn't stop. "For years, this company has been robbed from the inside," she said, tapping a remote. Screens behind her lit up documents, transfers, signatures. Raymond Wellington embezzled over $50 million. Federal agents are waiting outside. As if on cue, the doors opened. Handcuffs clicked. Raymond tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps. Naomi turned slightly. "Gregory Blackwood," she said calmly. "Your partnership in illegal real estate schemes is well documented. More agents, more cuffs." Margaret screamed. Investors recoiled. Then Naomi faced Ethan. "You divorced me in front of strangers," she said softly. "You threw $500 at me and called it charity. You said I came from nothing." She clicked again. "I now own the building your company operates in. Your lease is terminated. You have 30 days to leave." Ethan's knees buckled. "You forged my signature. You stole my savings. You buried me in debt." Another click. Those debts are now legally yours again." The silence was unbearable. Naomi looked around the room at the people who laughed while she cried, who filmed her humiliation, who mistook silence for weakness. "This isn't revenge," she said. "This is accountability." She stepped away from the podium as chaos erupted behind her, voices cracking lives, unraveling illusions, collapsing. Naomi didn't look back. She had already walked out once in shame. This time she walked out in truth, and nothing would ever be taken from her again. Justice did not arrive loudly for the Blackwoods. It arrived slowly, relentlessly, like winter setting in after the leaves are already gone. Gregory Blackwood's world collapsed first. Court dates replaced board meetings. His tailored suits were traded for prison-issued uniforms. The man who once spoke down to Naomi as if she were dirt beneath his shoes now stood silent behind glass, his empire reduced to case numbers and evidence folders. No one called him powerful anymore. Margaret Blackwood fell next. The woman who had thrown champagne and words like knives discovered how quickly wealth evaporates when credit runs out and favors stop being returned. The mansion was sold. The jewelry disappeared. Friends stopped answering calls. She ended up in a one-bedroom apartment that echoed too loudly at night, forced for the first time to sit alone with the sound of her own thoughts. Ethan Blackwood suffered last, and longest. His company folded within weeks. Investors fled. Employees resigned. Lawsuits stacked higher than his pride. The man who once handed Naomi $500 for the bus now stood behind a gas station counter, hands smelling of fuel, eyes permanently lowered. $45,000 in debt followed him like a shadow. Some nights he stared at his phone, rereading messages that would never be answered. Naomi never contacted him. She didn't need to. Claire Monroe disappeared from his life just as efficiently as she had entered it. The truth came out quietly, cruelly. The baby wasn't his. The marriage wasn't love. The plan unraveled, and the woman who once smiled beside him walked away without looking back. Ethan was left exactly where he had left Naomi. Alone, Vanessa Blackwood vanished from social media, from parties, from relevance. Shame proved heavier than wealth ever had. Naomi watched none of it directly. She didn't celebrate. She didn't toast. She didn't smile at the ruins. Because this was never about watching them fall. It was about balance being restored. For the first time in her life, Naomi slept without fear of being discarded. She walked through hallways that belonged to her not because of marriage, not because of permission, but because of truth. She carried herself differently now. Not hardened, grounded. They had taken years of her dignity. She took nothing from them but the lies back. And as the city moved on, as headlines faded and names lost their shine, one truth remained painfully clear to those who once laughed at her. They hadn't destroyed a weak woman. They had underestimated a survivor. And survivors don't seek revenge. They outgrow it. Naomi buried her father on a quiet winter morning. Snow fell gently the same way it had the night she was thrown out of the Blackwood mansion, only this time it didn't feel cruel. It felt still. Sacred. She stood between two headstones, one for the mother she never knew, one for the father who never stopped searching. Her gloved hand rested on the cold marble as she whispered, "I found my way back." Jonathan Wellington died knowing the truth that his daughter was not broken, not lost, not small. He left her more than an empire. He left her permission to live fully. 6 months later, Naomi sat in the office that was now hers. She dismantled corruption piece by piece, replaced fear with transparency, and turned power into responsibility. She funded scholarships for orphaned children, built affordable housing, created programs that gave people what she never had a fair starting line. She didn't become cruel with power. She became intentional. The girl who once survived learned how to lead. And here is the lesson this story leaves us with. Your beginnings do not define your ceiling. Being underestimated doesn't mean you are weak. It means others lack vision. Sometimes life strips everything away, not to punish you, but to free you. And the people who try to break you often become the proof of how strong you already were. If this story touched something in your heart, if you've ever been dismissed, humiliated, or made to feel invisible, know this: your chapter isn't over. It may just be turning. Tell me in the comments, did Naomi go too far? Or was this justice? If you believe karma has a memory like this video. And subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us your darkest hour might be standing right in front of your greatest victory. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.